All right, in this short demo, we're going to show you how to convert Kaggle's Titanic disaster machine learning example into a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK. All right, the first thing to do is to make sure that you've got Kubeflow deployed. I'm going to go ahead and be using Aricto's Kubeflow as a service, so go ahead and log into your Kubeflow deployment. I'm going to navigate over to the notebooks component, and from here select new notebook. I'm going to go ahead and name my notebook, and then I'm also going to take the default, which is going to be half a CPU, 1 gig of RAM, as well as 5 gigs of storage. So with those defaults, I'm ready to go ahead and launch my notebook. And once my notebook is up and running, I can go ahead and connect to it. Now within the Jupyter Lab notebook, I'm going to want to open up a terminal. And from within the terminal, we're going to want to git clone the Kubeflow/examples repository. And inside of that repository is going to be our Titanic project directory and files. So navigate to examples and then locate the Titanic Kaggle competition directory, open that up. And you'll see that you're going to have your project files, you're going to have your notebooks, your YAML files, as well as Python files. Make sure that you have a Docker Hub account because we're going to be using that as a registry for our containers. Make sure that you also have Docker Hub installed locally. Either the desktop app or the command line tools will work. We're going to go ahead and log into Docker locally to make sure it's good to go, which it is. Next up, we want to verify that we have Git installed locally. And now we're ready to go ahead and git clone the Kubeflow/examples directory locally on our development machine. And then over on Kaggle.com, make sure that you have an account and that you have also downloaded a Kaggle.json file, which is going to have your username as well as your API token, which we're going to need to create a Kubernetes secret. And this secret is going to allow us to not have to pass our credentials in clear text when we actually run our pipeline. So once you've gone ahead and done that create command, you want to create a resource.yaml file. And you'll see the content of that YAML file here. We're going to go ahead and paste that. Save out your YAML file. And once your YAML file has been saved, you want to go ahead and create apply your resource.yaml file, which will create your pod default. Next up, let's navigate locally in our development environment into the examples preprocess directory. And you can see here we've got two files, Docker file as well as preprocess.py. This is going to be the Python file that's going to dictate the structure of our preprocess component or pipeline step. So let's go ahead and build this Docker image. Once it's built, we're ready to go ahead and push it to Docker Hub. Remember, we're using Docker Hub as our container or our image registry, I should say. And we refresh the repositories view, and you can see that the preprocess image is there. We're going to rinse and repeat this quite a bit. Next up, we're in the feature engineering directory. You can see this is going to be the feature engineering Python file that's going to dictate the structure of our component. So from here, let's go ahead and build the feature engineering Docker image. Next up, we're going to want to now push this image up to Docker Hub. And once it's pushed up to Docker Hub, we are ready to go ahead and build our third component, which is going to be the decision tree component. In this directory, you're going to find two files, our Docker file as well as our Python file. The Python file is going to tell us exactly what's going to happen in this step. So let's go ahead and build our decision tree Docker image. And once the Docker image has been built, we are ready to go ahead and push that image up to Docker Hub, which again we're going to be using as our image repository. And now we're ready to go ahead and build our next step. And our next step is going to be the logistic regression image. So you can see we have our Docker file as well as our Python file. And now we're ready to go ahead and build our regression Docker image. And with the image built, we're ready to go ahead and push it up to Docker Hub. And once pushed up to Docker Hub, we're ready to build our next component, which is going to be the naive Bayes component. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening inside of that Python file. So let's go ahead and build this particular Docker image. And with the naive Bayes Docker image built, we are ready to go ahead and push it up to Docker Hub. And once pushed up to Docker Hub, we are ready to move on to our next pipeline component, which is going to be the random forest pipeline component. So here we're ready to again build our Docker image for random forest. And once the Docker image is built, we're going to rinse and repeat here. We're going to go ahead and push it up to Docker Hub. And once it's up on Docker Hub, we are ready to build our next pipeline component, which is going to be the SVM pipeline step. So let's go ahead and build that Docker image. And with the SVM Docker image built, we are ready to push it up to Docker Hub. And with the image pushed, we are ready to now build our final pipeline component, which is going to be the result pipeline component. So let's go ahead and build that result Docker image. And with the image built, we are ready to make our final push to Docker Hub. In this case, it will be the result Docker image. And with the push complete, we can now navigate up to Docker Hub, refresh the repositories view, and you can see we've got our preprocess, feature engineering, decision tree, regression, naive Bayes, random forest, SVM, as well as result Docker images ready to use for our pipeline. Next up, you're going to want to open up your kfp.py file, and here you want to sub in your Docker username as well as the image names as well as the tags that you used when pushing that stuff up to Docker Hub. Next up, we want to delete the YAML configuration file that ships with the project by default. We want to create a new one, so we do that by running Python 3 to the .py file that we just updated with the appropriate Docker information. And once that YAML is created, we want to download it into our local development environment. And once it's downloaded, we are going to want to delete the existing one that we have locally, just how we just did on our production system. And then we want to bring in the new one that we just created. And with that, we are ready to create a pipeline. So let's go to the experiments view. From here, let's go ahead and create an experiment, name it. Once it's named, we're ready to then build a pipeline. And we're going to do that by clicking on the pipelines view. And what we want to do is upload that YAML file that we just downloaded. So let's navigate to where that YAML file is. And again, this YAML file is going to have our pipeline configuration information. Once it's uploaded, click the Create button. So now we have an experiment and we also have a pipeline. We're ready to create a run. So click on the Create Run button. And here we want to assign this particular run to the experiment that we just created a few seconds ago. And with that, we are ready to click the Start button to create, or I should say start our pipeline. And with that, click on the actual pipeline name, and you can see we are now in the runtime execution graph. And here in real time, these steps are going to execute. You can see we've completed the pre-processed data step, feature engineering. We're now going through the various algorithms and models. And once that completes, we go on to our final pipeline step, which is the results step. And you can click on these individual pipeline steps and get more information about what's happening in those steps. Here we're clicking on the results step, and you can see the various results of the different models and algorithms that we selected. More information, details, logs, pods, events, as well as ML metadata. And that's it. You have successfully created a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK for the Titanic disaster getting started competition.